Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well. It's Wednesday, 18 October 2023. We're meeting today to talk about BTC, to talk about crypto, to talk about FTX, to talk about ETFs, BlackRock, because we're going to come back a little bit to what happened. We have had more news on the origin, and indeed I think that we are heading towards manipulation. We're looking at it all together now. As a reminder, you always have the possibility of having free access to the educational course, which is a 60-hour training course worth €400, which allows you to learn blockchain, crypto, investment, technical analysis, trading, everything to become profitable. Through 130 videos, 400 pages of guides, quizzes to find out where you are in your progress, and all for free. To have access to this lifelong training, simply use the platform of one of our partners. Everything is explained in the comments and descriptions. We start right away with the good news, which is that FTX's creditors should recover 90% of what they lost, which is huge because we were more on an idea of 60 minus 70%. We speaks of 90%. Almost all of it is very interesting in any case, the return that we have, because we must understand that during the costs of filing for bankruptcy, during the costs of maintaining the entire procedure, which has agreed the liquidators' firms are very expensive, I think we must be close to on $800 million or even $1 billion, which were taken from FTX to be able to carry out the liquidation. Okay, we remind you that this man's salary is just colossal. Okay, we remember that he had billed, I believe, $2 million for the first month or month and a half in terms of FTX treatment just for this person. So we are really in a process where it is a real drain on FTX. So my question is how? They arrived at 90% when they billed almost more than $1 billion in operating costs and had zero revenue. And that's where it's interesting to do the math and see, I think that when we have, that's it, the general return of the liquidation, we will be able to see whether or not there was all the funds in which it was distributed among all the assets. That's one thing. Or if there really was a big problem. I think it will be interesting to take stock once we have absolutely everything. We continue in the news with the fake announcement of the BlackRock ETF. On this, we have more information thanks to Zaxpet, who is precisely one of the people you absolutely must follow when you want to follow the issues of Rugul or Hack, because he is someone who does big investigations. And he determined that, in fact, the account that posted this had posted it 39 minutes before the Cointelegraph news, and that his account was completely deleted, and the message as well immediately after the news came out. And I think that we are really in a class of manipulation which should not have worked, because Cointelegraph should have validated the new thing which it did not do, and they ruled it here in their own news, in their letter of apology. But we must understand that when we have accounts like Cointelegraph or like all the big media generally, we will tend to be manipulated by people who seek to exploit precisely this type of action. And that's why we have to be very, very careful when we have news like that, and the FOMO that it can cause, because we are also in a race to have the news as quickly as possible. Quickly possible. And at some point, there is always the error that can happen, and Cointelegraph is the proof. And the 100 million liquidation is also proof of this. We continue with Phantom, and in particular the Phantom Foundation, which lost 7 million cryptos in exploit. So exactly, it was the employees who lost 7 million and the 550,000 crypto foundation. So we don't yet have too much information on how it happened exactly. However, the thing to remember is that it's a drop in the bucket compared to the foundation itself, okay? The foundation itself has more than 250 million in incentives, and as a result of runaway, so we are very far from 550,000 or 7 million. It's really a drop in the ocean, so you shouldn't worry about ghosts. But it's interesting to see that even foundations which have complex crypto protection systems manage to get siphoned off for a reason among many others. So you always have to be very careful even with your own accounts, your own cryptos. Really pay attention to your seed phrase or how you generally manage your different wallets. It's very important. We continue, and we are going to look at the figures which are already arriving. China's annual GDP is rather positive. We are coming out with something which is above the forecast. So this is a good surprise for China. We say that China is collapsing. I remind you that there we have a GDP which is still positive. Next to that we will have the IPC Europe which will fall. and especially the building permits of September 1430, where we risk having a little bit of momentum, because it is important to follow that, especially since yesterday we had retail sales which were above forecast. That means that we have an America which is producing and which is purchasing despite the fact that we are at the highest level in terms of American debt, that we are at the highest level of debt on credit cards. So that means that there are fewer and fewer possibilities for American families to buy. So we are in a dynamic which is truly special. And that's why we will also have to monitor the reaction of the market, because if we have here an American economy which continues to hold up, and we have inflation which continues to rise because oil continues to go up, at that moment, we will find ourselves on a party which will be obliged to raise the rate again, although I think that it will not do it. Although I think that it is just the fear linked to the increase for calm the markets, and we will be more in a dynamic of maintaining rates to be validated. In all cases, 1430, we will have a return, which made it possible to build. It is a very important point in the American industry. We continue with the S&P 500, which is more in a consolidation phase. We swallowed the large part of the bearish candle that we had already started to go and retest here. And there we are, really in a consolidation zone. I think we're going to sideways for a little while here. I know, do we have strong enough news either to do a retest also a little bit higher, still the same scenario, or a bearish retest, a little bit lower? Either we maintain that and we sink, or we break, we'll retest that, and we sink. As long as I don't have key levels and volume that break this level for me, I won't go for another scenario. So we stick with this idea. In terms of oil, on the other hand, we have a signal. We have a signal that the retest is breaking. We will wait until today's closing, of course. In any case, it's the start of the candle. If it turns out it's just a wick to take liquidity, and we'll get back into it. We're really going to wait, but there we could really have a very strong signal. As a reminder, 88 equals 93. All right? Finally 95, but for me, a retest is definitely a bullish breakout. And that would precisely be the idea of the prolongation and increase of the conflict between Hamas and Israel, and therefore that means an increase in conflicts in the Middle East. And therefore a strong impact in the area which produces the most oil, and inevitably we will end up with a strong impact on the price of oil. This is to be monitored because precisely inflation in the United States is mainly linked to oil. And if oil sinks, finally rather accelerating, at this time we will have inflation, which will rise and very complicated to maintain therefore on these 2% objectives for the Fed. In terms of the ART index, very interesting. It's that we continue to sink in. For me, I don't really have validation yet. We're really going to wait the week, and I would like that to validate this. We close below the 105.5. There we will have a real signal for a retracement. Otherwise, we are still in a form of classic retest before leaving again. And therefore there it would be the consolidation of this previous candle to start rising again, and once again, 108, the target after. And so we would have classically an oil which accelerates upwards, and here a dollar which accelerates upwards, which is a cocktail which is a bit explosive for the American economy. At the BTC level, we are still in this dynamic. Here we have another accumulation, break of this accumulation, and establishment of a higher range on the support of 25,000. So we are really in something classic. We see that the momentum here is still in the form of compression. We still have our particular levels, whether it is the reload zone at 22,000 up to 19,500, the support which still holds 25,000, and in terms of bullish acceleration, I just wanted to offer you a view that is a little more different this time, to really show you the notion of a range which is very strong, and why we are in a very strong range. Because when we look, we really have the heart of the range which will be here between 30,000 and 26,200, which correspond to key levels which we find here at the support level and at the level of the lower part of this range. So we are in a classic range shape, where we have the upper part which is held at 31,600, with in fact the establishment of a second range which is the bullish range, and a bearish range which we find here in the 26,500 part up to 25,200. So we actually have a range composition. We no longer have any flow at all. And therefore, the fact of being in a range also means that we have to adapt on this part. And clearly what is happening following this acceleration, this huge candle, which was fake news, this consolidation of the price. What is interesting to see is that we have a nice compression which is taking place, which is classic compared to what we had there. This is what I explained to you yesterday, that I was precisely going to wait to have a form of lateralization before being able to think and see where the liquidity is. Already there are several things to see. It is that one, we are in a compression. When we say compression equals compression of liquidity, we will see it later. But we have the liquidity which is currently forming. Another important point is that we find ourselves here in a dynamic which is nevertheless close, here, to a dust divergence. We are even on a bullish divergence if we are seeing it here. And so, that would imply that we would seek at some point greater liquidity before making a real move. So, let this be the real strong upward movement, so we will do a short squeeze again, then have a real acceleration, something that I hardly imagine. But nevertheless, we keep it in mind. Why? Because the liquidity here is quite low in the upper part. When we see proportionally what we have at the bottom, at least at the level of Kim Fisher, we see very clearly that we have the lower part, which is really substantial, in which we have at the level of 28,300, almost the price, up to here 27,500. We have a lot of liquidity, so we could have a very strong downward movement while we have high liquidity. So yes, we're not shooting anything just for Kingfisher, but when we start to look at the heat map a little, we have things that are different. We see that we have here our compression. We can actually see the compression that is taking place. We see that we have small shorts which are located here, until overall we are going to say 29,000, 28,980. We are going to say 29,000 to make it simpler, in which we could also have a small acceleration and then make a downward movement. For what? Because we have two big lines. There, if you see clearly, there are two huge lines, this one and this one. These are huge lines at over 140 million per line at liquidation level. That's why I'm telling you that the lower part is really very attractive. So we currently have big longs which are positioned with a lever because it is necessarily a big lever. And in addition, it can be seen at the level of the perpetual, the increase in the perpetual that we had. It is the implementation place of these levers. It is less seen at the level of the positions of the top traders, where we have something which is relatively flat, and the open interest, which is in the ADIC, it still remains relatively consistently. We have balanced part, but we have re-accelerated. It is mainly long ones which are positioned. So we still have an attraction to actually break this level to go and retest what? Retest the retest level that we didn't meet, okay? We're going to retest 27,800 here, which will at the same time be consistent with filling in this entire part to do a retest to then determine if we do not have an acceleration. So what I'm going to wait for here is going to be acceleration to the sky, recover the shorts, strengthen part of the longs once again here, then bearish movement, we break, we're going to retest here, okay? This is something that I am going to wait for because we are once again in a range policy. That is to say that we are in the short term, but if we take a little step back, and we is going to go daily just to have a little more visibility in the short term, we see that we are in a range policy here. We are really in this dynamic where we went to retest part of the classic top of the range. We can very well go and retest the lower part before starting up again, okay? So we are still in this range. Unfortunately, we have not broken. And I think we will not break right away. It will take news, this time, which is not fake news, to really trigger a flow, and that is what we will wait for because, as usual, we are patient. I hope you liked this video. If so, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. It always makes me very happy. And we'll meet again at 13:30 for a video on GRT, the Graphs Crypto.